Crossing the star Trek+Female strong cool Article+ too many Vests+Delicious Food+Fighting while making money, the former master of cultivation, Wen Jiu, woke up and became an interstellar orphan, barely surviving by picking up garbage every day. Poor, too poor. In order to avoid sleeping in dangerous houses and eating garbage, Wen Jiu decisively went to 3047 Planet Academy to register for education, just to be able to eat and dress warmly. However, just eating and waiting for death is not enough. Poor Wen Jiu has set a small goal of 1 billion for himself. So Wen Jiu rolled up his sleeves and worked in a cafeteria selling rice, fortune-telling stalls selling talismans, clothing stores selling clothes, beauty salons selling cards, and she only wanted to become the richest person in the local area, but accidentally became the #1 in the college. Yangchun #1. Having nutrient solution is enough, who would still go to the cafeteria to spend money on junk food. Before long, all the students and teachers in the school said that the braised pork belly, pickled Chinese cabbage fish, spicy diced chicken and sweet and sour sirloin were delicious. Wen Jiu. There is still 1 hour left for the cafeteria to serve this round. Please queue up in an orderly manner. Thank you for your cooperation. Yangchun #2. Silent, are there still people who believe in fortune-telling mysticism these days? Is it okay to show off and take a look at the place? Half a month later, the fortune-telling stall was surrounded by various crowds of people seeking symbols and hexagrams. Wen Jiu. Don't queue up, peach blossom talismans and talismans are sold out today. Everyone, hurry up next time. Yangchun #3. No, there really isn't a medical soldier coming to fight, right? The next day, a group of armed soldiers lay on the ground in the training ground with bruises and swollen faces. Wen Jiu. What about the newly opened traditional Chinese medicine clinic, such as drop plaster and orthopedic massage? Keywords of the novel. Full-level tycoon, she is rolling in interstellar wealth without pop-ups. Full-level tycoon, she is downloading the complete text of Interstellar Wealth Rolling. Full-level tycoon, she is reading the latest chapter of Interstellar Wealth Rolling. Chapter 1. Starting with garbage picking. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 1. Starting with garbage picking. The cold wind is raging, and the spider webs between the ruins sway with the wind. Gravels and debris scattered everywhere, intertwined with the damp and moldy atmosphere and pungent odor in the air. In the cold and damp corner, there was a little girl curled up there. Wen Jiu was wrapped in a tattered woolen blanket, trembling uncontrollably. Behind him was a half-collapsed brick wall, and not far away, there were occasional rodents and snakes running around. Although there was not too strong a cold wind in this position, she was still frozen to the point where her mouth turned black and her face turned pale. But Wen Jiu still persisted, his gaze firmly fixed on the large garbage dump ahead. Just as the temperature continued to drop, she could only hug her legs tightly and hide herself as much as possible in that old woolen blanket. It's too cold, she has never encountered such a cold wind before. Half a month ago, Wen Jiu was still a modern cultivator. Although he lived in the deep mountains and forests to practice with his master, he at least had no worries about food and drink. But she never expected that as soon as she woke up, she would become a 12-year-old orphan living in the interstellar era by picking up garbage for a living. And the cultivation method she has learned cannot be applied here. God knows what she felt when she woke up and found herself in a dirty and chaotic environment. The cultivator Wen Jiu became an orphan and inherited the memories of the original owner. The original owner has been wandering around in this environment like a mouse since childhood. Every day, he goes to the garbage dump to dig up some food and even tries to compete with adults for some scrap metal to sell for money. In short, he tries his best to survive. Unfortunately, the original owner was too poor, and a sudden illness caused her to lose her life. Wen Jiu has always had a strong ability to accept things. After all, she has witnessed her senior sister flying with her left foot and right foot. It only took her one night to digest her emotions, and the next day she started flipping through the trash. There's no way, if you don't pick up garbage, you'll starve to death. She has been spending the past half-month like this, but over time, Wen Jiu has gained experience in picking up garbage. Small garbage dumps like that have the highest probability of picking up nutrient solution and discarded food, but the adults wandering around are watching closely and are at risk of being robbed at any time. And this kind of large garbage dump, even though there are many adults squatting to pick up scrap metal and sell it for money, this area is too large, and children like her can still rely on flexibility to pick up some and go back. However, it is impossible to compete with adults for good things. Even if one finds them, they will be snatched away and even beaten. In a situation where one cannot even afford medicine for a long time, getting beaten is highly likely to result in death. So Wen Jiu came to this large garbage dump not to risk her life to grab valuable things, but mainly to pick up some food to eat. After all, people need to fill their stomachs to survive. Until a strong light shot down from the dark night sky, the huge garbage car stopped in mid-air, making a roar. Wen Jiu immediately tugged at the large pocket next to him and found a good spot to wait for the opportunity. Boom 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 boom. The garbage on the garbage flying car has been dumped, and as the light disappears, the car flies away. Wen Jiu rushes into the garbage dump like an arrow leaving a string. There are still many people around, like her, rushing frantically towards the garbage dump. Wen Jiu endured the nauseating and pungent smell, struggled to rummage through the garbage dump, while also avoiding being discovered by adults like wolves, tigers, and leopards. In such an environment, robbery is a common occurrence. She is located in a location she has visited multiple times before. Due to its distance from the center of the garbage mountain, few people would come here to search first. Usually, people only come here after searching other places. Wen Jiu flipped through the garbage pile with her hands covered in mud and dirt, but she was already so hungry that her feet shook and she felt dizzy, relying solely on one breath to hold on. Fortunately, her luck was not too bad either. She found a broken test tube under a dowel, with a shallow layer of blue liquid at the base. Wen Jiu picked it up and sniffed it. After confirming that it was nutrient solution, he quickly poured it into his mouth. There's no taste, it's like plain water. Until there was no more nutrient solution inside the test tube, she reluctantly threw it away. The long hungry dizziness finally eased a bit. After sobering up a bit, Wen Jiu continued to search among them. I don't know if her luck was really good today. She even flipped through a few boxes of unopened meat slices. Wen Jiu quickly checked the shelf life on it and it happened to expire the day after tomorrow. She found it today and can still make do with it for 2 days. So she immediately stuffed these boxes of meat slices into her pocket, and then continued flipping through the garbage. Before she could wait for long to search, she suddenly heard a rapid sound of footsteps coming from the left. Wen Jiu was alert and dragged his pocket, then searched for a nearby oil tank barrel to hide inside. She had just hid in for a while when she heard 2 men cursing outside. Didn't you say there's a little kid here every day? Where are the people? I saw it a few days ago, I wonder why I'm not here today. Then you'll call me a fart. Did I come here with you to grab the air? I can't even see anyone, useless. You're in a hurry, Hammer. Look for it again. She might have changed places. Upon hearing the sound, Wen Jiu huddled motionless inside the oil tank barrel, slowing down his breathing and trying to conceal his movements. Indeed, the world is treacherous. Even a poor person like her who can't pull out half a star coin from her pocket would want to snatch it. Tisk, I'm afraid it didn't freeze to death somewhere. If you want to find it yourself, I'll go find someone else. Gulauzies, you go away, I'll find it myself. After speaking, the footsteps of the other person gradually faded away. But the person left behind was still circling around, occasionally making a rough rumbling sound. Wen Jiu perked up her ears and patiently waited. She was too young now, and it was too difficult for adults to resist. She naturally hoped to avoid it. However, the situation did not develop in the direction she had hoped for, and the person had been searching for a while without giving up, with unbearable screams that never stopped. Wen Jiu also cursed inwardly that this person's not leaving really takes up her time picking up garbage. And she was huddled in the oil tank, almost freezing from the piercing cold. After a while, the shouting and searching finally disappeared. Wen Jiu waited for a while and carefully lifted the lid of the bucket after confirming that the people outside had indeed left. But just as she lifted the lid of the bucket, a pair of rough hands suddenly reached in and grabbed her hair, which was like withered grass, lifting her up like a carrot. Gulauzi, the little rabbit is hiding here. The pain of hair pulling on her scalp almost drove Wen Jiu crazy. She kept struggling in the air, but mentioning her adult man was as easy as lifting a rabbit, and she couldn't break free at all. The burly man with several scars on his face looked at her for a moment, then smiled and said, "She's still a woman, it seems she can sell for a lot of money." However, Wen Jiu did not give up his struggle and tried to use his hands with pointed nails to scratch upwards, causing Chen Gang's hand to prick and ache. "Grass you!" Chen Gang suddenly threw Wen Jiu to the ground, and then saw that his hands were covered in red marks. He was extremely angry and wanted to punch Wen Jiu on the ground. But Wen Jiu didn't give him this opportunity. Although she was thrown to the ground in excruciating pain, it was important to escape. Before his fist fell, Wen Jiu gritted his teeth and turned over, then immediately got up and ran towards the distance. But before she could run far, a rope flew from behind, tying her left calf and tripping her to the ground. Wen Jiu was quickly dragged down like a captured prey. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Finally eating meat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Finally eating meat. Tisk tsk, I see where you can go. Chen Gang's rough and aggressive voice was getting closer and closer to Wen Jiu. As he was dragged back to his original position in such a place full of garbage, Wen Jiu's body was already covered in tiny cuts from debris. Finally, Chen Gang retrieved the goods he was looking for. He looked at Wen Jiu who had fainted in front of him with satisfaction, thinking that he could sell the little girl and exchange it for a star coin to squander. But he completely ignored the little girl's left hand buried behind her back. Chen Gang crouched down, humming an out-of-tune, slowly approaching Wen Jiu, wanting to tie her tighter with a rope before taking her away. But in an instant, Wen Jiu, who had fallen to the ground, suddenly opened his bright and clear eyes, like a long dormant beast. In just 1 second, Chen Gang covered his neck, which was constantly bleeding, and fell to the ground convulsing, his widened eyes filled with surprise and fear. The little girl who stood up again was holding a sharp iron plate in her left hand, with crimson blood dripping from the pitch-black plate. Chen Gang's blood flowed like a spring, convulsing for less than a minute. The murky pupils dilated, and his hands, which he had been trying to hold tightly, hung down beside him. It is not advisable to stay here for a long time. With a calm and gentle demeanor, she quickly searched the man's body and found some things that seemed to sell money. Then, she quickly walked back to the oil tank and picked up her big pocket before leaving. Facing the cold wind, Wen Jiu walked barefoot on the dirty soil until she saw the abandoned suspended bus for her hiding place. She stopped to take a breath, then carefully searched the surroundings before finally getting inside the bus. After dragging his tired body in, Wen Jiu covered the car door with a wooden board standing beside him. The interior of the car was already covered in rust, and after removing all the seats, there was only an empty space left. The originally uncovered windows were nailed with wooden boards and iron sheets picked up by Wen Jiu. Due to being abandoned for too long, many damp moss had also grown in the corners. However, in such an environment, having a place to rest is not easy. Wen Jiu threw her pocket aside, she was really exhausted. She collapsed on the pile of beds, made of tattered fabric with a thud, although not soft, it was always more comfortable than lying on a hard floor. After resting for a while, Wen Jiu sat up and looked at himself. She was covered in mud and stains, her tattered clothes were stained with eye-catching blood, and her limbs were covered in bloodstains one after another. Fortunately, the wounds are not deep, so there is no danger to life. It is unclear whether there will be scars in the future. Wen Jiu took out a handful of herbs from the bag beside him and crushed them, then gently applied them to the wound. When will these days come to an end? After dealing with the wound, Wen Jiu lay on the ground and muttered to himself, swaying his feet along the way. The icy touch made her lower her head and remember that her shoes had been dropped while being dragged. She spent more than 10 days digging through the garbage and finally found a pair of shoes that didn't have any holes and fit well. She hasn't been comfortable for a few days yet, and now she has returned to being a barefoot immortal. The already impoverished life is even worse. Thinking that she had no shoes to wear again, Wen Jiu let out a deep sigh. Life is not easy, let's sigh for a long time. Never mind, if it's a big deal, pick another pair. After a while, Wen Jiu's mood will recover. She stood up and walked to her big pocket, starting to carefully clean up her gains for today. Although today's garbage collection operation was forcibly interrupted, her gains were still quite good. Firstly, there are 5 boxes of meat slices, and Wen Jiu checked them again. The packaging is intact, and the label shows that this is the meat of the golem beast, with a shelf life of just the day after tomorrow. She held up these boxes of meat slices one by one in front of her nose and sniffed them, confirming that there was no rotten or unpleasant smell. Only then did she put these 5 boxes of golem beast meat slices into the wooden box she used to store food. Then Wen Jiu sorted out some small parts and finally began to inspect the items of the human trafficker who was trying to sell her. Money from the Interstellar era is stored in the Star Network. To access the Star Network, one must first possess and bind the wisdom ring. But let alone Starnet, she can't even afford a smart ring. But she knew that many smart rings had positioning functions, so in order to prevent being approached, she did not take that person's smart ring. There wasn't much on the man's body either, except for the rope that flew to tie her, which looked quite valuable. The other miscellaneous items added up to sell for about 100 star coins. These star coins may not seem much, but for Wen Jiu now, they are already a considerable sum of money. You should know that the lowest level nutrient solution costs 5 stars, and one nutrient solution can provide a satisfying feeling for a meal. Wen Jiu calculated in her heart that she could hold on for more than 10 days after buying 20 nutritional supplements. It seems that her days ahead are relatively easy. Wen Jiu took this pile of items back into his pocket and planned to wait until dawn before going to the scrap collection store to sell them. It's only 4:30 in the morning now. She drank a few drops of nutrient solution before, and she's not very hungry at the moment. So Wen Jiu retreated back onto the pile of fabric, closed his eyes, and began to feel drowsy. As time slowly passed, only her slight undulating breathing gradually remained in the car. Not long after, the dazzling sunlight shone through the cracks. Wen Jiu seemed to feel the warmth and slowly opened his eyes to rub. Alas, when will these days come to an end? She really wants to wake up and go back to her once beautiful life. But Wen Jiu only thought for a while before waking up from his fantasies. It was better to give up his fantasies and recognize reality. Wen Jiu dug out a pair of torn cloth shoes from the wooden clothing box in the corner. Although her thumb extended straight out from a huge hole, these shoes fit well at least. Then she rummaged through her clean old clothes and put them on. After all, as she walked out covered in blood, her grandmother who was collecting waste was afraid she would have to close the door on the spot. After thoroughly flipping herself, Wen Jiu finally took out a box of golem beast meat slices from the wooden box. She has finished drinking her nutrient solution and can only make some meat slices to eat. It's just that the environment is simple and cannot perform any complex processing. This is the first time Wen Jiu has found ingredients that are well packaged and have not expired since coming here. Although vegetables and fruits in the interstellar era are much more expensive than meat, the price of meat is not much cheaper. She, as a poor person, can only rely on nutritional supplements to make a living. Wen Jiu first searched for a small amount of seasoning he had collected before, and then washed the meat slices with clean water and put them into a bowl. This glutinous pork is somewhat like the pork belly of ancient Earth, with a combination of red and white, fat and lean, but unfortunately there is no wine to use to remove the fishy smell. But fortunately, Wen Jiu found a plant similar to ginger before. He cut a few pieces with a sharp iron plate and threw them into a bowl, then added some salt and pepper to mix well. Then she found some sharp iron rods to knock and beat, and then threw a few flammable materials outside the car to make do with the fire. Ignite the brilliant flames, and after a long time, thread the meat slices onto the iron rod and start grilling. Gula meat slices are evenly fat and thin, and the fat makes a sizzling sound when roasted on the fire. After the oil seeps out of the meat, it drips into the fire and bursts into small sparks. Not long after, as the meat aroma grew stronger, the skewers in Wen Jiu's hand were finally roasted. After sprinkling cumin, she took a bite and tasted it. The plump and lean golem beast meat has a rich aroma, and the flavor of cumin perfectly blends in without appearing abrupt at all. It also dissolves the greasy taste of the fat meat, and I feel that the golem meat becomes more fragrant and not greasy as I chew it in my mouth. Great! With a sigh of satisfaction, she finally took a bite of meat after so many days had passed. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Can only make a living by selling waste. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 can only make a living by selling waste after finishing the delicious barbecue, warm it up and put away the utensils. After tidying herself up again, she put on her pocket and walked out the door. The garbage dump she lives in takes several hours to walk to the nearest city area, but Wen Jiu has been there a few times before and doesn't feel too tired. Let's just exercise. It was not until near noon that Wen Jiu finally saw the edge of the city. She drove lightly to a waste station in the suburbs and called out in a sweet voice, "Zhao Grandma." However, after entering the waste station, she did not see the familiar old lady, only a tall and thin young man put down the goods and glanced towards her. "Grandma Zhao has gone out, are you here to sell things?" Wang Nan squinted her eyes and looked at Wen Jiu, who was thin and small. Upon hearing this, Wen Jiu nodded silently and slowly dragged his pocket towards the storage table. She didn't wait for Wang Nan's help, so she quickly threw her pocket on the table. "TSK, the quality of these things is average." Wang Nan walked up to the table, put on his gloves, and casually played with the things in the bag before smacking his mouth. "At most, 80 stars. While Wang Nan was checking the items, Wen Jiu also secretly observed him. As the saying goes, appearance comes from the heart. Even if he pretends to be kind, he can still tell the truth from his appearance. This person has thin lips and narrow chin, and a strong sense of self-interest. However, his cheekbones are not particularly high, and he is still someone he can make friends with. There is a simple iron plaque hanging on the chest of his coarse cloth clothes, engraved with "Zhao Grandma Resource Recycling Station," which looks like a helper recruited by Zhao Grandma. 100. Since it's not Grandma Zhao herself, Wen Jiu didn't mean to be polite and directly offered his estimated price. She has sold waste here several times in the past half-month, and the recycling price for these things is still reasonable. Wang Nan didn't expect the seemingly gentle and ignorant child in front of him to quote a price that happened to be the highest recycling price for these items. But he is actually a businessman, and he doesn't want to just comply with her words. He can cut a little bit. So Wang Nan took out a few items from the bag and said in a friendly tone, "Little sister, the price I gave you is definitely the most reasonable. You see, there is a lot of wear and tear on the tail of your red gold screw. Also, there are too many scratches on this printed circuit board. Brother, it depends on your young age. He even gave you an extra 10 stars worth of coins. If you go to another store to sell, they can only give you a maximum of 70. But Wen Jiu didn't take his trick and insisted on his offer expressionlessly, 100. Wang Nan's grin stiffened a lot in an instant, and he sighed before saying, "Ah, this is it, 90. Wen Jiu didn't bargain with him anymore. She silently stuffed the items on the table back into her pocket and dragged her pocket towards the door without looking back. Now Wang Nan was stunned. He thought the little child needed to have a few more rounds with him, so he left without saying anything. There aren't many people coming to sell scrap recently, so the business we have one can't run like this." Seeing Wen Jiu about to leave the door, Wang Nan gritted her teeth and shouted, 95. Seeing that she still hadn't turned back, and even walked faster and faster, Wang Nan was completely at a loss, gritting his teeth and shouting for the last time. 100. Just 100. After hearing his quotation, Wen Jiu turned around. Unlike her indifferent expression just now, she walked towards Wang Nan with curved eyebrows and eyes. After seeing her smiling face clearly, Wang Nan's already injured mood due to the failed bargaining became even more depressed. However, Wen Jiu only walked up to him and reached out his little hand, waiting for him to pay. "Ah." Wang Nan gritted his back teeth and slowly handed Wen Jiu a 100-star coin from his waist bag. "Thank you, brother." Wen Jiu grabbed the star coin tightly held by Wang Nan and put it in his bag. In this era, paper currency is rarely used anymore. Payment is made through star net transfers, which means that poor people like them who cannot afford to buy smart rings and cannot use star net are still using paper currency for transactions. Wen Jiu collected the money and emptied all the things in her pocket. She had received the money and was about to leave when she was suddenly stopped by Wang Nan. "Little sister, do you sell that rope?" Wang Nan stared at Wen Jiu with shining eyes, his gaze fixed straight on the bundle of ropes on her waist. Seeing his expression, Wen Jiu suddenly understood. It seems that the price of this rope is probably not low, otherwise this iron rooster wouldn't be so proactive in asking. So Wen Jiu took the rope down and held it in his hand. After thinking for a moment, he made a sweet smile and said, "Sell it, this is also what I picked up." Upon hearing Wen Jiu say that he had picked it up, Wang Nan immediately calculated in her heart and rolled her eyes to say, "Your rope should be a replica, not very valuable." "Is that so, big brother?" Wen Jiu pouted and scratched his hair, like an innocent child. "How much can it sell for?" Wang Nan pressed down his excited mood and pretended not to care and took 2 steps. "It's only 400 star coins," he said to prevent suspicion. He even added a few extra sentences. "Brother is also thinking that the cold season is coming soon. It seems pitiful that you are young. He wants you to buy more things to keep warm, which is why he offered this price. We don't usually accept imitations like this." After speaking, he secretly glanced at Wen Jiu, who was thinking with his head down, patiently waiting. He opened 400 coins, and this child doesn't know how long it will take to pick up garbage to earn this amount. But unexpectedly, Wen Jiu suddenly lifted his head and smiled at him, saying, "Since that's the case, I won't trouble you." She quickly tied the rope back to her waist and ran out of the door in a flash. Only Wang Nan remained frozen in place. Wen Jiu ran for a while before stopping, and then pondered for a while on Wang Nan's words. Seeing him so eager for this rope, the price is likely to be more than 400 yuan. She needs to go to several waste stations to ask and estimate a suitable price. With this thought in mind, Wen Jiu walked towards another waste station that she knew. But before she could take a few steps, she saw a grandmother with gray hair trembling towards her direction. Grandma Zhao. Wen Jiu recognized Grandma Zhao at a glance and ran to her side with a smile. Zhao Grandma watched as Wen Jiu ran over, coughing twice and smiling kindly. "Oh, my dear daughter. I haven't seen you for a long time. I haven't received much recently, so I haven't come." Wen Jiu took the initiative to take the pocket held by Grandma Zhao and helped her slowly move forward. "Didn't I come to see you as soon as I had something in stock?" Wen Jiu has always been able to speak fluently, and as long as she wants to chat, there is nothing she cannot continue to talk about. However, as she held on to Zhao's grandmother, she took advantage of the other person's pulse and suddenly realized that Zhao's grandmother should have a cold cough. So Wen Jiu continued, "Grandma Zhao, what did you do when you just went out? I didn't even see you when I went to the waste station." Zhao grandma smiled and replied, I went out to see a doctor. Recently, I've been coughing a bit." Wen Jiu knew it in her heart, and Zhao grandma often gave her high prices when she came to sell scrap, taking good care of her. So Wen thought for a while and said, "Well, I've heard others say that drinking more ginger juice can relieve my cough." Zhao grandma was a bit confused after listening, but the feeling of coughing surged back in her heart. She could only cough fiercely for a while before weakly speaking, "What is ginger?" Wen Jiu finally realized that there seemed to be no ancient Chinese plants in this world, and even if there were, many scientific names were different from what she knew. So Wen Jiu took out a ginger from his pocket and said, "That's it. Crush it and boil it with water, then remove the residue and take the soup. Actually, it's best for Grandma Zhao to drink more ginger and apricot soup for this symptom, but Wen Jiu doesn't know if there are almonds and licorice in this world." Zhao grandma took the ginger handed over by Wen Jiu and looked at it. "Good girl, is that what you're talking about? We all call this horseradish, and it tastes really spicy." Wen Jiu nodded and said, "This is it. Grandma, could you give it a try?" After speaking, she stuffed the remaining few ginger into Grandma Zhao's pocket. Zhao grandma didn't want to disappoint Wen Jiu's kindness, so after thanking her, she started chatting with Wen Jiu again. Until walking back to the waste station. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Dual System Abilities. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Dual System Abilities. As soon as the two of them stepped into the door, they saw Wang Nan bargaining with others again. "Big brother, I really didn't treat you." Wang Nan held up something like an iron lump and said bitterly, "Your condition is really not good. I'm afraid you won't accept it anywhere else." The middle-aged burly man standing in front of him trembled and asked in a voice, "Brother, this is something I worked hard to get back. I have to sell it for 200, right? 150 can't be any more. Look at all the rust on this. We need to remove the rust after we collect it, and we have to give up the cost of 100. Wen Jiu followed Wang Nan's words and looked at the iron lump, which was indeed covered with red marks and several depressions. But the middle-aged man still had no intention of letting go and begged earnestly, "Is 108 okay? The cold season is coming soon, and my whole family is waiting to buy warm stones." Wang Nan originally wanted to refuse, but Zhao grandma suddenly quickened her pace and walked closer, saying, "That's 108, Xiao Wang." Wang Nan just saw Zhao grandma walking with Wen Jiu's support. Since the boss spoke, it was difficult for him to refute, so he had to pounce and take out the star coins from his waist bag to give to the middle-aged man. And the middle-aged man also saw Zhao grandma and quickly thanked her after taking the star coins. "Thank you. Thank you." The middle-aged man looked excited and his eyes turned a little red. "Thank you so much." Zhao grandma smiled and waved her hand, seeing off the middle-aged man. "Daughter, have you prepared all the necessary supplies for the winter season this year?" Speaking of the winter season, Grandma Zhao suddenly remembered that Wen Jiu seemed to be alone. She is just a 12-year-old child and doesn't know how to get through it. "Not yet," Wen Jiu answered truthfully, as she did not have the necessary supplies to prepare for the cold season. Previously, the original owner would have thought of ways to make some warm stones, winter clothes, food, etc., but now she doesn't have much star coins all over her body. Not to mention preparing supplies, it's hard to say whether she will have food next month. Grandma Zhao sighed and turned around to enter the room. This makes Wang Nan inexplicably feel a bit helpless. Zhao grandma is not kind-hearted and wants to spend money to buy supplies for this little ghost, is she? "Little sister, where are your parents?" Wang Nan whispered in front of Wen Jiu as Zhao Grandma entered the room. Wen Jiu glanced at him and said with an indifferent expression, "I don't know, it should be dead." She really doesn't have much thoughts about family affection. In the past world, she was just an orphan, picked up by her master and raised. And the original owner is also an orphan, and the whereabouts of his parents are unknown. Upon hearing this, Wang Nan felt a sense of silence and awkwardly scratched his head. Fortunately, the awkward atmosphere didn't last long, and Grandma Zhao slowly walked out with a bag of things. Seeing her walking out, Wen Jiu quickly stepped forward to help Zhao Grandma. Zhao Grandma patted Wen Jiu's hand with satisfaction and handed her the pocket, saying, "These are some old winter clothes. If you don't mind, take them and put them on." Wen Jiu's brows and eyes curved as she opened it and saw that it was filled with colorful clothes, much like the northern cotton jacket she had seen before. So Wen Jiu smiled and thanked her, only to see Grandma Zhao take out a crumpled paper again. "This is the enrollment brochure for 3047 college. You can give it a try." Zhao Grandma coughed twice and continued, "You don't have to worry about food and accommodation when you go to school." Wen Jiu took the piece of paper and unfolded it, carefully reviewing it. It says that 3047 college is recruiting new reserve soldiers and can enroll for free as long as they pass the physical fitness test. Not only does it offer scholarships, but it also includes accommodation and meals. This is like dozing off and sending pillows. Wen Jiu is worried about money. If he can go to school, at least he won't have to sleep outdoors anymore. Wen Jiu continued to look, and the last line was written. Enrollment ceased on October 6, 209, by Yu Xingyuan. Today seems to be October 5, and Wen Jiu suddenly realized it. So she picked up the pocket of her winter clothes and hurriedly said goodbye to Grandma Zhao, then quickly ran out of the recycling station to find the floating bus station. Mainly because it is already past 3 p.m., 3047 College is located in another urban area. If she walks, at least she'll have to walk until evening. So Wen Jiu ran to the nearest station, gritted his teeth, pulled out 10-star coins, and boarded the suspended bus to 3047 College. Although she sleeps in the abandoned floating bus every day, this is still her first time riding here. It feels similar to modern buses, but the suspended buses here are all 3-story and float in mid-air, with speeds that are completely incomparable to ordinary buses. After sitting for about 20 minutes, Wen Jiu arrived at the entrance of 3047 College. Even though it is already the final period of enrollment this year, the entrance of the college is crowded with people queuing up to sign up. Wen Jiu searched for a queue with fewer people and waited patiently at the end. Not long after, it was finally her turn. The teacher at the registration office looked up at her and said, "First, fill out the information, then take the form and walk towards the tent over there, go inside to test your physical fitness, and then turn right to the registration office." Wen Jiu nodded and picked up his pen to quickly fill it out. After filling it out, she followed the teacher's instructions and crawled into a blue tent, where there were still many people waiting for testing. Wen Jiu looked at the testing instrument with some curiosity. A simple iron chair was placed next to a control console, but there was no display on the console, only a projection-like screen flickering continuously. As soon as those testers lie down, 2 tentacle-like objects will emerge from the top of the chair and stick tightly to the person's forehead. A bar chart immediately appeared on the screen. First level gold-based abilities, comprehensive evaluation of C+. The teacher in charge of recording quickly finished writing the table and handed it to the person who got off the chair. And Wen Jiu looked confused. What is a superpower? The memories she received were not related to abilities. So she took advantage of waiting a little longer and found a teacher who looked more friendly. "Hello teacher, may I ask what a superpower is?" There are many poor students who try to avoid the cold season by enrolling, so Yu Rumen didn't show any surprised expression and squatted down with a smile to answer Wen Jiu. A superpower is an energy that each of us is born within our bodies, but most people find it difficult to perceive their own energy before learning how to use it. Of course, there are also many people who are born without superpowers. At present, the abilities developed by the Federal Institute can be divided into 8 major categories: gold, wood, water, fire, earth, light, dark ice, and dark ice. After enrollment, teachers will teach you in detail how to use these energies to assist mechs. Taking a test before enrollment is also for better teaching in the future. Yu Rumen's explanation was very detailed, and Wen Jiu quickly understood. She knew some of the mecha in the original owner's memory, but this ability sounded a bit like the elemental power she had awakened during her previous cultivation. Next. Wen Jiu originally wanted to ask a few more questions, but it was her turn to sit in the chair and test. She had to say thank you in a low voice before running to the chair and sitting down. After lying down, she watched as the tentacle-like object slowly pressed against her forehead. The touch feels a bit cold, and there is also a feeling that seems to be absorbing her energy. As Yu Rumen watched the skinny girl go to test, she walked up to the control panel, wanting to see what value this girl would have. However, the image displayed on the screen made her eyes widen uncontrollably. It turned out to be a dual ability. Wood type ability level 1, fire type ability level 1, comprehensive evaluation A+. In fact, according to the rare dual abilities, it should have been judged as S+ level, but the other values of Wen Jiu are relatively low, and the combination of this wood-fire dual system is quite disappointing, so overall it has become A+ level. Surprisingly, it's a dual lineage ability. Only out of 100,000 supernatural beings can a dual lineage emerge, right? After hearing Wen Jiu's test judgment, everyone inside the tent stared at her in amazement. But Wen Jiu didn't have much fluctuation. She used to practice both wood and fire in her cultivation, and her master even said she was a natural talent for alchemy. But after she blew up 5 alchemy furnaces, the master never mentioned that she was a good seedling again. So Wen Jiu sat up calmly and walked up to the teacher in charge of recording, saying, "Teacher, my watch." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Successful registration for city strolling. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Successful registration for city strolling. The teacher suddenly realized and quickly handed the form to Wen Jiu. Wen Jiu lifted the tent canopy and walked towards the registration office, handing over his form to the teacher at the registration office. Congratulations on passing our hospital's test. Upon hearing this, Wen Jiu couldn't help but smile. The thought of not having to worry about hunger or camping in the wilderness, and even working hard to earn a scholarship, made her heart so happy. The next second, the teacher in front of her came a bolt from the blue. Unfortunately, it has been verified that you are a black door, and do not meet our school's free admission standards, so you need to pay a tuition fee of 8,000 Singapore dollars to enroll. 8,000. I can't even get this amount by selling her. When Jiuxing's eyes were wide open, why is she just a black man? Can you please be accommodating, teacher? Look at my watch again, I'm a dual lineage superpower. Wen Jiu moistened his eyes and choked his voice. Moreover, I haven't had parents since I was young, and I don't want to be a gangster. Wen Jiu worked hard to showcase her acting skills, but the teacher didn't buy into her. Sorry, we cannot change the college's regulations without authorization. Can't she really just grab a bite? Wen Jiu felt a bit frustrated, but she still didn't give up and continued to ask, is there any quota for impoverished students in our college? Or should I write an IOU first and work and study slowly to get through? The teacher shook his head apologetically and said, I'm sorry, but if you can't pay the tuition fee, I'm afraid so. Wait a moment. Before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Yu Rumen, who rushed over. Yu Rumen walked to the registration office wearing high heels, gently stroking her curly hair and curling her red lips. With a smile on her face, she said, Zhou Sen, you can first handle her admission procedures, and then apply for a spot for her to work on campus. The teacher, known as Zhou Sen, was stunned for a moment and stuttered, "Director Yu, this may not comply with the regulations. Regulations are dead, people are alive." Yu Rumen didn't look at him anymore, she simply reached out and tugged at Wen for a long time. "Little girl, you are a rare and talented talent. I helped you get into school, and you will have to study hard to repay me in the future." Wen Jiu looked at the stunning beauty in front of him, blinked and smiled, "Thank you, pretty sister. Okay, you go back and prepare. Remember to come and report earlier when school starts in 3 days, Yu Rumen said with a charming smile looking at the distant figure of Wen Jiu. Yu Rumen swept away her previous smile and coldly looked at Zhou Sr. How could a good seedling with dual lineage abilities be released like this? Next, just follow the process and I will report the rest to the vice president. After speaking, she left the registration office, leaving only Zhou Sen standing in place, which was quite awkward. He didn't mean to make things difficult for Wen Jiu. It is a rule of 3047 college that black households must pay tuition fees. However, he quickly regained consciousness and continued to handle procedures for others. Since he successfully registered, Wen Jiu no longer needs to prepare supplies for the upcoming cold season. Taking advantage of more than an hour before dark, Wen Jiu decided to stroll around the city area. This is her first time coming to the urban area, and the interstellar era has seen rapid technological progress. Unlike the cities we used to know, this place was filled with dazzling neon lights, and the later the sky, the brighter it became. Tall buildings made of various metals stand tall and point straight into the sky, weaving into a jungle of steel and iron. The constantly changing electronic screens are embedded everywhere, making people dizzy. The floating buses constantly shuttle through it, and there are also occasional floating flying cars circling in mid-air, with deafening roars. After strolling around, Wen Jiu saw on the electronic screen outside the shopping mall that Redstone Supermarket was on sale. Discount promotion. Wen Jiu touched her chin, which seemed to be noteworthy news for her poor soul. So Wen Jiu followed the crowd into the mall and followed the directional signs into the Redstone Supermarket located on the basement floor. There are quite a few items in the supermarket, but there are few that Wen Jiu can recognize. Mainly because during the interstellar era, most animals and plants underwent significant changes, especially plants, which differed greatly in appearance from before. Wen Jiu carefully identified in the vegetable and fruit area, and after searching for a while, she finally found the bitter almonds and licorice she wanted. These two names have not changed, but the bitter almond has changed from a small grain to the size of an apple. Wen Jiu sighed inwardly. She had originally planned to weigh a few liang, but now only one is enough. However, Wen Jiu doesn't have much money now, so after finding the item, she first glanced at the price tag. Bitter almond today's promotion price. 8 star coins per nut. Licorice is on sale today at a price of 12 stars per bag. If this price were to be changed to the previous one, Wen Jiu would definitely turn around and leave, but it's different now. She will be able to enroll in school in 3 days with food, clothing, and housing, and she can still afford to spend over 20 stars. So Wen Jiu decisively threw these two into the basket of machines behind him. It must be said that this type of machine is indeed very convenient. You don't need to push the cart or carry the basket yourself, just temporarily enter your face and the machine basket will automatically follow you. Later, Wen Jiu wandered around other areas and after picking up 8 of the lowest grade nutritional liquids, he checked out and left the supermarket. The harvest today was quite good. I bought 8 basic nutrient solutions and got 1 free. Wen Jiu's brows and eyes curved as he carried his pockets towards the exit. When she walked to the exit of the shopping mall, it was dark outside and pouring rain was pouring down. The rain splashed on the ground with a crackling sound, leaving no storage device for items. I could only hold my shopping bag in my arms and rush towards the rain curtain. Wen Jiu originally planned to walk home after finishing shopping, but the heavy rain disrupted her plan. She could only withstand the rain and run to the nearest suspended bus stop, then use 10 coins to take the bus to the nearest station to the garbage dump. The flying floating bus pierced through the vast holographic projection in mid-air, and raindrops trickled down the windows. Wen Jiu looked out the window, the colorful neon lights illuminating her gray-blue eyes. She is an outsider who does not belong here, but she still wants to have her own place in this new world. B12 Street in Funwu District has arrived. Passengers are requested to bring their personal belongings and prepare to get off. Wen Jiu got off the car and the heavy rain had stopped. Funwu District belongs to the slums, where the residential buildings vary in height, with sparse lighting and a scene of dilapidation and desolation everywhere. But even in such a dilapidated place, there is no warm place to stay. It will take over half an hour to walk from here to the garbage dump. Wen Jiu didn't stay here for too long. She brushed her wet forehead hair back and expressionlessly carried her shopping bag towards the pitch-black gravel road. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Finally learned. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Finally learned. The road leading to the garbage dump has not been well repaired and remains the oldest mud road. After being washed away by this heavy rain, the muddy road has completely turned into a muddy road. The yellow-red soil turned soft and rotten into mud, and the mud and water accumulated on the bumpy road surface. Just stepping on it will bring mud and water to the legs of the pants. Wen Jiu tiptoed up and walked cautiously on the muddy and slippery ground. When she returned to the abandoned bus, she was already soaked and in a state of embarrassment. Mud and water froze recklessly on her calves, dyeing her originally wheat-colored skin a earthy yellow. However, waiting for her was not just the embarrassment on her body. Although the car was covered with wooden boards and iron sheets to block the wind, the gaps were still not filled. The rainwater flowed into it through the gaps, and a puddle had already accumulated on the floor. Wen Jiu seemed to be commonplace, and with an indifferent expression, he cleared the boxes that had not been eroded by rainwater before moving them to the open space outside. Then he squatted on the ground and filled it with water with a rag, walked outside to wring it dry, and then walked back to suck water and wring it dry. This goes on and on until there is only water vapor left in the car that cannot be removed. Tonight, I can't sleep on the ground anymore. Wen Jiu picked up the boxes one by one and put them together in the car. Because the clothes and fabrics that were originally laid on the ground were completely wet, Wen Jiu could only hold on to himself and curl up on the hard box. The moisture lingering in the car carried the cold, freezing for a long time and making it impossible to fall asleep. She could only stare at the rusty roof in a daze. These days are really unbearable. If only she had money, she could live in a mansion, grill the stove and eat delicious food. Wen Jiu became more and more engrossed in her thoughts, feeling like the little match seller who was about to freeze to death. But she would never just fantasize like this. Wen Jiu secretly set a small goal in her heart, earning 1 billion first. When she has money, she goes to buy a luxury house and wants the whole house to be heated. Want unlimited food? You need a soft mattress. She wants to make a lot of money. She wants to be a rich woman. Wen Jiu's belief became increasingly firm, and at the same time, he felt like there was a fire burning hotter inside his body. This fire gradually warmed her body and made her drowsy. In the next few days, Wen Jiu relied on the meat slices she had picked up before and the nutrient solution she had bought to make ends meet. She didn't go to the garbage dump to dig through the garbage anymore. Until the third day of enrollment, Wen Jiu packed up all his miscellaneous items early and walked to the Zhaope resource recycling station to sell all the items he couldn't use in the future. Then he handed over the bitter almonds and licorice he had bought before to Grandma Zhao. Grandma Zhao, soak this bitter almond in warm water, peel and tip it, and then mash it. Stir-fry the licorice until golden brown, grind it into fine powder. Then peel and wash the horseradish I gave you before, chop it into small pieces, and mash it with salt. Finally, boil this together and drink it to treat your cough. Wen Jiu came this time and saw that Zhao's cough became increasingly intense, even coughing up blood. So she gave careful advice to help Grandma Zhao recover well. After all, Grandma Zhao took great care of her before. If it weren't for the bag of clothes Grandma Zhao gave her, Wen Jiu would still have to wear worn-out cloth shoes now. After explaining to Zhao Grandma several times, Wen Jiuzai took a suspended bus to 3047 College. When Wen Jiu arrived at 3047 College, it happened to be 8 o'clock in the morning, and the teacher was standing at the entrance of the college waiting for everyone to call the roll. Wen Jiu didn't procrastinate and walked straight to the queue, queuing up and waiting. It wasn't until 8:30 that all the new students arrived. Everyone line up and follow me in, no loud noise, no looking around. The team is very large, and Wen Jiu estimated that at least 4,000 to 5,000 students will be present. After walking for a while, the teacher asked everyone to stop when they entered the college playground, and 9 teachers were standing on the podium looking at them. Wen Jiu quietly glanced at the podium and found that the female teacher who had helped her solve difficulties before was also among them. Before she could continue her observation, the teacher standing at the center walked up to the front and began speaking, "Welcome everyone to 3047 College. From today on, you will be the reserve soldiers of the major military regions of the Federation, so be prepared to face the pain and suffering. But to become a reserve soldier, just registering is not enough. You need to go through a series of training to stand out." The teacher looked sternly at everyone. "I believe everyone knows the cruelty of our training. Out of humanitarianism, the school will distribute pensions to disabled students at the end of each semester, and also award scholarships to outstanding students. Wishing everyone a pleasant journey ahead." The teacher's speech was very short, and after the end, many teachers came and led a group of people to leave. Wen Jiu's queue was at the forefront, and he didn't wait long before following the teacher towards a building. "This is your dormitory, one for 2 people." Wen Jiuben lowered her head to think about something, but as she listened to the teacher's voice, which was somewhat familiar, she lifted her head to take a look. It turned out to be an acquaintance, and the team leader was the one from the registration office a few days ago. But Zhou Sen didn't look towards her and stood tall with his hands on his back, continuing, "The dormitories have already been allocated. You now have 15 minutes to find your dormitories, change into school uniforms, and gather." As soon as these words were spoken, all the students present looked at each other in confusion. 15 minutes, we need to find a dormitory and change into school uniforms to gather. Where is enough time for this? Zhou Sen squinted his eyes and looked at the motionless little radishes in front of him. As he cleared his throat and was about to give a lecture, he saw a small, thin figure running quickly into the door from the queue. Until her figure disappeared, the others stood still, their faces full of surprise. "What are you still standing for? Wait for me to bring you wine and tea." Zhou Sen let out a loud shout, and only then did the others react and scatter, running towards the door. Zhou Sen secretly sighed that the road for these children to transform from mischievous children into well-trained reserve soldiers was still long. And Wen Jiu had already wanted to run when Zhou Sen finished speaking, but the others still didn't move, so she hesitated for a moment. As a result, seeing Zhou Sen's face darkening, Wen Jiu suddenly understood and rushed into the dormitory building. She had just rushed into the door when a huge holographic projection rolled over, displaying everyone's dormitory allocation. Wen Jiu quickly glanced at it, and her information happened to be displayed on it. Wen Jiu's 12-year-old female dormitory A3, 505, Wen Jiu remembers quietly observing the environment on his way here, and A3 is located in the 3rd building on his left. So she ran out from the left gate and headed straight for the A3 building. When she ran into 505 panting heavily, a girl with the same pale complexion was also in the dormitory, almost gasping for breath. Wen Jiu nodded and greeted the other person slowly, and both of them understood that it was not a good time to introduce themselves, so the girl just nodded in response. As Wen Jiu hurriedly put on his school uniform and returned to front of Zhou Sen looked at her in surprise and then reported the time, 13 minutes and 49 seconds. Listening to himself not exceeding the time limit, Wen Jiu sat directly on the ground to rest, waiting for other classmates to return. However, when everyone returned, except for Wen Jiu, only the other two did not exceed the time limit. So Zhou Sen glanced at them and said, except for the 3 people who didn't exceed the time limit just now, everyone else ran around the school 25 times. After speaking, everyone dared not stay in place much this time and suddenly started running forward. Wen Jiu looked at the other people running away and secretly felt grateful that they had indeed completed the task. As a result, Zhou Sen looked at them with a smile the next second and said, "You 3, go around the school 20 times. Thank you all for your recommended tickets and favorites, thank you very much. 030 Please use more recommendation tickets to smash me, don't pity me because I am a newcomer." QAQ, end of this chapter. Chapter 7. A World with Only Dark Cuisine. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 8. Give this money to you, shall I drink from the west and north? You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 8. I give you money, I drink the wind from the west and north. There are 3 boys sitting in the office, looking around 14 or 15 years old. After seeing Li Shanyan and Wen Jiu come in, their playful voices suddenly disappeared, and they all looked at Wen Jiu together. Are you the new student arranged by Teacher Yu? The strongest boy among the 3 spoke first, and he sat cross-legged on the sofa, looking at Wen Jiu. Wen Jiu didn't respond for a long time, and she calmly turned her hand back to the back. No matter which teacher introduced you to, you must understand the rules when you come to our cafeteria student department. Shi Gang saw that Wen Jiu didn't say a word, thinking she was scared. He sneered disdainfully, "From now on, you can come over every day during lunch and dinner time to check in. If you owe a debt, half of your monthly salary will be deducted by the school. The remaining half will be automatically sent to your StarNet account by the school. However, according to our rules, you must take out half and submit it to us. Do you understand?" Wen Jiu lowered his eyes and thought in his heart, "Give this money to you, I'll drink from the west and north." Although she doesn't know what the salary for working in the cafeteria is, how many stars does she get after deducting half of it? So Wen Jiu looked up and said, "What should I do if I don't want to submit it?" As the words fell, everyone else seemed to have heard some big joke and started laughing heartily. "Little sister, don't joke with your brothers like this." Shi Gang felt like he was about to burst into tears with a smile. But Wen Jiu continued with a serious expression on his face, "What should I do if I don't want to submit it?" Seeing that she seemed to be asking seriously, the group gradually stopped mocking and showed a fierce aura. "Not paying. Either get beaten or don't work here." Wen Jiu lowered her head again, and everyone thought she was like those poor students before, daring to ask but not daring to resist. The next second, Wen Jiu looked up and smiled, saying, "Excuse me, I don't want to pay." After speaking, Wen Jiu took steps and prepared to go back. Shi Gang sat on the sofa watching her slender figure and sneered again. "Poor devil, do you think you can finish it by saying don't hand it over? Wen Jiu did not turn back due to his mockery, but instead walked faster and faster. This made Shi Gang very unhappy in his heart, so he gave a glance to the other 2 people, and they immediately stood up and rushed towards Wen Jiu. As they were about to rush towards Wen Jiu, the 2 of them swung their fists with determination. Unexpectedly, Wen Jiu suddenly turned around and swung a whip on their arms, leaving a bloodstain on the arm they had originally raised. "Senior, isn't this a bit lacking in martial arts ethics?" Wen Jiu still maintained a smile, but the gray-blue eyes that looked at them were full of coldness. The 2 were suddenly whipped off guard, both feeling a bit angry. Soon, they swung their fists again and attacked, but this time their fists suddenly ignited orange-red flames, and the temperature around them also increased. Wen Jiu felt inexplicably excited when he saw someone using a power for the first time. But she didn't take it lightly, quickly retreated for a distance, and then swung a whip again. This time, the whip did not fall on their arms, but wrapped around their legs. Wen Jiu used his strength to pull and instantly tripped the two running people to the ground. Let them have an intimate contact with the floor. Even a one-word horse split. After watching them fall, Wen Jiu couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He never expected the rope he picked up to be so effective. However, without waiting for Wen to observe for a while, suddenly a gust of wind hit her. Wen Jiu immediately reacted and wanted to turn his head to avoid it, but the gust of wind was too fast, brushing against her face and then hitting the wall behind her straight. Pop. The piercing sensation was like a needle piercing, and warm blood dripped down her cheeks. If you want me to tell you, you're such a useless person. Before Shi could finish speaking, Wen Jiu rushed towards him with a dagger in his hand. But Shi Gang didn't take her to heart and continued to shoot a few gusts of wind at Wen Jiu. Although Wen Jiu dodged flexibly, he was still cut in the arm by one of them. But the piercing sensation made her even more excited, and she quickened her movement again, like a ghostly shadow. This made Shi Gang feel an alarm ringing in his heart, and an inexplicable sense of panic surged into his heart. He instinctively wanted to close the door to avoid it, but I don't know when Wen Jiu flashed in front of him. He raised a dagger and asked with a smile, "Do you want to close the door? How can I help you?" This sentence made Shi Gang shudder. Before he could react, the warm dagger pressed against his neck, and the fear of his flesh being cut made Shi Gang unable to hold back his emotions. I was wrong. I was wrong. But Wen Jiu didn't let him go because of his plea for mercy. Instead, he kicked him into the office and closed the door, smiling at him. Subsequently, the sound of Shi Gang's screams kept ringing, which frightened both Li Shanyan outside the door and the two on the ground. It was Li Shanyan who first reacted and called the teacher with his wisdom ring. It was time for dinner now, and Zhou Senben was dining in the cafeteria, but he rushed to the scene as soon as he received the communication. Zhou Sen's mood suddenly became heavy. What situation? Li Shanyan was the least affected person, pointing to the office door and trembling uncontrollably. Zhou Sen suddenly felt uneasy and quickly opened the door. I saw a little girl inside with her back to him. The more he looked, the more familiar he felt, so he tentatively asked. How long is it warm? Wen Jiu had already heard the commotion outside, and with a smile on her face, she turned around and said, Teacher, what's up with you? Li Shanyan dared not look at Zhou Sen with a cold gaze, but lowered his head and whispered back, Shi Gang was kicked into the office by her, and then. He didn't dare to continue with the remaining words. He and the other two heard Shi Gang's screams with their own ears. Zhou Sen ignored Li Shanyan's words. He first took out the treatment bag he carried with him, then crouched down and asked softly, Wen Jiu, have you seen Shi Gang? At this moment, Wen Jiu nodded obediently like an innocent child and pointed to a wooden cabinet in the room. Good child. Zhou Sen touched her head as a sign of comfort, then got up and walked towards the wooden cabinet. Then Zhou Sen stood up and took a deep breath, grabbed the handle and opened the wooden cabinet. Thank you all for your lovely support. Please use more recommendation tickets to smash me, QAQ. If you like it, please bookmark it. Your support is my motivation. Bixingson 030, Fragmented Reading. I don't know what the situation is in this chapter, but it was automatically deleted by the Cute Review. The author has tried their best to fill in the deleted areas, but there may still be some areas that are not smooth. If you find any inconsistencies or irregularities in the text while reading, please leave a message to remind Ors. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Family wealth lasts for a long time. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Family wealth lasts for a long time. Inside, there crouched a trembling figure. Shi Gang, come out. Even though the person was covering his face, Zhou Sen could still recognize him as Gang from 3rd grade. Gang carefully moved his hand away, and when he saw the person coming, he was so excited that he was about to burst into tears. Woo 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 woo, Teacher Zhou. Gang originally wanted to get out of the wooden cabinet, but when he saw the warm and smiling face behind Zhou Sen, he immediately withdrew. Zhou Sen felt even more speechless when he saw his appearance. Hurry up and come with me to the teaching office, he said. Teacher Zhou, I feel pain. Gang choked up and said, am I going to finish it? However, Zhou Sen looked him up and down and said, stop pretending and come out quickly. Gang still wanted to speak out about Wen Jiu's wrongdoing, but he just moved around in the cabinet and it made him sweat in pain. Zhou Sen impatiently urged him again. From his perspective, Gang had no scars on his entire body, so he didn't want to cry out for pain here. But what he didn't know was that Wen Jiu deliberately didn't leave any marks and punched the most painful acupoint on Gang's body. Seeing this, Gang had to endure the pain and climb out of the wooden cabinet. But every step made him feel unbearable pain, and in the end, Li Shanyan helped him slowly walk to the teaching office. Tell me, what's going on? Yu Rumen glanced at them and said, don't think about lying, the surveillance will be called in soon. Gang was about to vent his grievances when Yu Rumen glared at him. Then he watched as Yu Rumen kept her head down for a long time, sat her on the soft sofa, and poured her a cup of hot water to warm her up. Little sister, tell your sister what happened. Yu Rumen sat next to Wen Jiu, lifted her long legs, and looked at her. Wen Jiu whispered, they bullied me. Gang has been relying on his relatives to work as a butler in the cafeteria and bullying people in various ways, so Yu Rumen has heard of these things, but she has not found any evidence to clean up. So she continued to ask Wen Jiu, and then what? Then I counterattacked. Wen Jiu could have pretended to be innocent and evaded the situation, but if the surveillance footage was released, it would have been exposed. But when it comes to this, she is just self-defense, so Wen Jiu has no intention of getting by pretending to be innocent. After listening, Yu Rumen took out the medical kit from the cabinet. She first cleaned up the bloodstains on the warm wound, then took out an ointment and squeezed out some to gently apply on it. Then Wen Jiu watched as his wound was covered with transparent ointment and began to heal visibly to the naked eye. Here you are, don't hurt yourself in the next fight. As soon as Yu Rumen finished speaking, Zhou Sen walked in and took out a metal ball from his pocket and threw it to Yu Rumen. The other party firmly caught it, pressed the switch, and the metal ball opened from her hand. A beam of light and shadow shot out from it to form a light curtain, and then began playing the surveillance video. The video recorded scenes from Li Shanyan finding Wen Jiu in the cafeteria, to the two entering the office, and so on. Yu Rumen pulled a chair and sat down, casually yawning. Until the scene of Wen Jiu leaving the office, she and Zhou Sen both believed that Wen Jiu had been bullied by Gang. In just a few minutes, they realized they were wrong. Yu Rumen looked at the warm and agile movements and precise movements in the picture, and his phoenix eyes became even brighter. I have really picked up good seedlings. After the video was played, Gang immediately cried and howled, Teacher Yu, did you see that? We really didn't do anything. However, Yu Rumen sneered and looked at him, didn't do anything. Did the four of you work together to bully a new student and call it nothing? Upon hearing this, Gang shrunk his neck in frustration. Can the person who had beaten him so hard that he couldn't move be called a new student? But he didn't dare to say these things. Alright, Wen Jiu, please go back to the dormitory first. Yu Rumen regained her charming posture. You guys are waiting for Teacher Wang to pick you up. Wen Jiu obediently responded and didn't forget to close the door when leaving the teaching office. As soon as she took a few steps, she heard the sound of a crackling thud coming from inside. This force is much heavier than when she just started. Even the screams of Gang and his companions were louder. Wen Jiu didn't stay much and walked straight back to his dormitory. The roommate I met earlier was dozing off in bed, so Wen Jiu lightly closed the door and walked to his bedside. She used to wear school uniforms and return to the team without paying attention to the environment in the dormitory. Wen Jiu sat on the bed and glanced around. Although the furnishings here were somewhat rudimentary, they could at least provide shelter from wind and rain, so there was no need to worry about being flooded. And the configuration of various items is quite complete. There are 2 sets of school uniforms for summer and winter, as well as a 4-piece bed set and some daily necessities. Wen Jiu was very satisfied with this and looked up at his bedside table, only to see a small box with a new student handbook underneath. She first picked up the box and opened it, inside which stood a bronze wisdom ring. Then Wen Jiu looked at the new student handbook again, and finally understood that the college had equipped each new student with the wisdom ring. Reading is really good. Wen Jiu decisively put the smart ring on her finger, and as soon as she put it on, she felt a faint electric current surging inside her body. Then she tried to manipulate it with her mind and saw a small light curtain popping out of the wisdom ring. New user detected, do you want to bind the user? A mechanical yet icy voice suddenly rang out in her mind. Wen Jiu was only momentarily stunned before realizing it. He tried to make a click on the light screen with his fingers, and soon the picture changed. Starting to bind users, please set your personal information. Wen Jiu followed the instructions step by step, feeling like an elderly person out of sync with the times. It took me a while to complete the information entry, followed by personal image settings. Please set the personal image of the user, Jiatsai Wangguan 9, on StarNet. The universal network of the Federation is the StarNet, where in addition to necessary real information, user nicknames and personal images can be freely set. So, without even thinking about it, one entered the nickname, Family Wealth 9, and immediately began happily pinching people. But as soon as she browsed through the available appearance costumes, a message suddenly popped up on the screen. 3047 Zhou Sen requests to add you as a friend. Successfully added. Wen Jiu originally thought that Zhou Sen was here to add a friend, but the other party popped a bunch of messages for her. Let her pinch the person interface directly slide back to the normal desktop. 3047 Zhou Sen. The matter between you and Gang has been resolved. 3047 Zhou Sen. In the future, you will be responsible for a separate window in the cafeteria, and the income will be transferred to your Star Network account after deducting tuition fees from the college. 3047 Zhou Sen. I will send you the specific work of the cafeteria later. The working hours are from 11:00 to 13:00 and from 17:00 to 19:00. 3047 Zhou Sen. Our college offers elective courses, you know. Just avoid working hours and choose courses. I didn't expect Zhou Sen to be so talkative, but Wen Jiu still responded well to the news. Family Wealth 9. Good teacher Zhou. 3047 Zhou Sen. The name is good. After Wen Jiu finished replying to the news, she didn't bother pinching people anymore. Instead, she continued to flip through the new student handbook, preparing to plan for her future half-work, half-study life. Hey, you're back. The girl who had been sleeping soundly in bed before finally woke up and looked at Wen Jiu with sleepy eyes. Today's update has been delivered. We hope everyone can vote on QAQ more often. Thank you very much. At the same time, I also appreciate the cute little ones who have clicked on my collection. If you like it, please support me a lot. 030, end of this chapter. Chapter 10. Yangchun Noodles and Celestial Potatoes 1. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 10 Yangchun Noodles and Celestial Potatoes 1. Unlike the warm wheat-colored skin, the other person has a fair complexion and delicate features, like a doll. The girl on the bed rubbed her eyes and sat up. Hello, I'm Xiao Shishir. Hello, I'm Wen Jiu. Seeing her friendly attitude, Wen Jiu generously introduced herself. Xiao Shishir is very familiar from birth, even Wen Jiu, who claims to be talkative, doesn't think she has as much to say. Which district are you from? What courses are you planning to take for a long time? I'm almost exhausted from running 25 laps during the day. Wen Jiu was operating on the light screen while referring to the freshman manual, while listening to Qiao Shishir's various nagging. However, Qiao Shishir did not have any ill intentions, so Wen Jiu would still spare some time to answer a few sentences. After completing the operation, Wen Jiu finally submitted the course he had chosen. And Qiao Shishir beside her widened her eyes and asked, "You've taken so many courses. Do you also plan to become an armed mech soldier in the future?" Armed aircraft armored soldiers. Wen Jiu had some doubts, she had not yet understood the knowledge in this area. Purely based on the mentality of paying tuition fees and not wasting them, I want to learn all the courses I am interested in. Seeing her face full of confusion, Qiao Shishir enthusiastically began to do science popularization work. We are now reserve soldiers. After we have completed 5 years of study and passed the assessment, we will choose a branch of the army. There are 3 main categories: commanders, armed aircraft armored soldiers, and logistics soldiers, and I don't know which branches are even more detailed. Wen Jiu nodded, realizing that he could upgrade to a higher level unit in the future. But she hasn't thought about her long-term military career yet, only thinking about how to make money to pay off her debts. Today is the first day for new students to enroll, so there are no classes in the afternoon. So Wen Jiu stayed in the dormitory and chatted with Qiao Shishir for an afternoon. As it approached 4 p.m., Wen Jiu set off towards the cafeteria. Zhou Sin had already sent over the instructions for cafeteria work, which actually meant doing dishes, cooking, and cooking at fixed times. It should have been Wen Jiu who assigned her a job after reporting, but after discussing with the teachers, Shi Gang became Wen Jiu's sole operator of a window. She can also recruit classmates to work here, but the prerequisite is that she can earn a salary. However, managing a window alone is not difficult for Wen Jiu. She used to have a great love for food, but her master always asked them to reduce their appetite in order to open up the valley. But Wen Jiu believes that if a person lives, they must eat, and if they don't eat, it's meaningless. So she often cooks delicious food for herself in private. After Wen Jiu entered the cafeteria, her senior classmates who came to receive her had a much gentler attitude. They took her to the assigned window and talked about many work matters before leaving. One looked around for a long time and found that the space here was relatively small. The kitchen utensils and stove looked like they had been used for a long time, and there was even oil stains attached to them. We have all the basic seasonings, but the outer packaging has not been unpacked yet. She walked over to the storage rack again and saw that there were no ingredients on it, except for a large bag of flour, a large bag of potatoes and eggs, and a large handful of onions. Wen Jiu remembers the classmate he received earlier saying that the ingredients are distributed uniformly by the teacher in charge of managing the cafeteria every week. And the ingredients posted at each window are different. So she didn't think much, first clean up all the places here, and then start thinking about what food can be made with these ingredients. After much thought, it's possible to make Yangchun noodles and Tianchan potatoes. Do as you please. Wen Jiu first took out an appropriate amount of flour, water, and salt to make a smooth dough, then peeled and cut the potatoes one by one and soaked them in water. Then she washed the onions again, and the onions here were even thicker than the previous ones. In order to make the food more beautiful, she patiently cut them small. After cutting a bowl full of scallions, she estimated that it was enough before stopping. I also thought about mixing Tianchan potatoes, and Wen Jiu thought I could make some chili oil for later use. So he started rummaging through the materials in the kitchen. Wen Jiu found a bag of chili noodles and white sesame seeds, poured a portion of each into a bowl, and then poured hot oil over it. The simplified version of chili oil is made. But there was still a while before the dough woke up, so Wen Jiu picked up a frying pan and one by one fried a large plate of fried eggs to hang on the plate. When the time was almost up, Wen Jiu picked up a rolling pin and quickly rolled the dough into a thin and moderately thick dough. Then pick up the kitchen knife and cut it into evenly thick and thin noodles, and the most basic staple food is now available. There were still 20 minutes left until 5 o'clock for dinner, so Wen Jiu decided to order himself a bowl of noodles to practice his hand. While waiting for the water in the pot to boil, Wen Jiu took out a large bowl to wash it clean and started adding seasoning. Because there was no lard, she could only use sesame oil, light soy sauce, and salt to make a simple flavor. Then Wen Jiu picked up a ball of noodles and put it into the pot. After a few minutes, he quickly took it out and put it into a bowl. I scooped another tablespoon of noodle soup and poured it over it, then sprinkled a little green onion on top. The students at the other windows were busy, only chatting leisurely about noodles. She thought to herself, it's a pity there's no lard, otherwise this bowl of noodles would be even more fragrant. However, compared to those dark dishes, this bowl of noodles is truly a delicacy in the world. Wen Jiu was enjoying his meal when suddenly a person appeared and knocked on the transparent glass at the window. For a long time, I heard from Teacher Zhou that you were working in the cafeteria, so I came to support you. Xiao Shishir smiled sweetly and pointed to the bowl of noodles that she had been holding for a long time. She continued, I want a bowl of this. Do you have any other dishes here? Give me one too. Wen Jiu nodded and swallowed the last bite of noodles, then put down the bowl and started busy. She first scooped out an appropriate amount of potato chips from the pot that soaked the potatoes, then lit another large pot and poured oil to heat it up. When the oil was almost cooked, she threw the long potato chips into it. Then he grabbed a handful of noodles and put them into the hot water he had previously boiled to start cooking. When the potato chips are fried, the noodles on the other side are also almost cooked. So Wen Jiu first picked up the potato chips with a sieve and hung them aside, and then put the noodles into a bowl. Gently and skillfully pour the soup on top, sprinkle with scallions, and finally pick up a golden fried egg and place it on top. Wow, what is this? Xiao Shishir took the bowl of noodles with a curious expression on her face, and the aroma of the noodles made her momentarily confused. She actually doesn't really enjoy eating because these dishes are too unpleasant, so she always relies on drinking nutrient solution to fill her stomach. But this aroma made her feel her stomach start to growl, which was rare. Yangchun noodles. Wen Jiu answered as he poured potato chips into a large bowl and began mixing potatoes. She skillfully added various ingredients and her movements were seamless. After mixing, Wen Jiu put the silkworm potatoes into a small bowl and sprinkled them with some green onions before handing them to Xiao Shishir. This smells so good too. What is this? Xiao Shishir smelled a completely different fragrance from the previous Yangchun noodles, and immediately felt her tongue twitching. This is Tianchan potato. You can try it first to see if it tastes good, and then pay for it. Mainly because Wen Jiu hasn't thought about pricing yet and thinks that Xiao Shishir won't run orders, so he decided to let Xiao Shishir take the lead and make the payment after he thinks about the price. So Xiao Shishir smiled and thanked her, then quickly picked up 2 bowls and found a seat to sit down. End of this chapter.